Okay. All right. Hello. I'm Marilyn McCormick, and my journey with Red began about 10 years ago, really a little bit earlier when I was a child and watched Red. But I'm so happy to introduce you today to someone who has walked the journey with Red for many more years than I have. I would like you to meet Dr. William Mett, who has been a friend of Red's for
about 30 years.
About 30 years, and you've shared a lot of interesting anecdotes, and you have worked with him with his art, and what else? Tell us
we
about
traveled together, we did concerts together, and helped him as he went from city to city, and gave many exhibitions throughout the United States, had many art exhibitions, not only in Hawaii, but Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, Georgia, all over, where people came in from all over the world to see his beautiful artwork.
And did you tell me that he also had an exhibit at Carnegie Hall?
Yes, we had a private exhibition in conjunction with one of his concerts at Carnegie. I think we took 15 or 20 of his paintings and had a private showing, and all of them were sold long before the concert even started.
No, you said with his concert. Was it a concert of his music?
No, actually, he after he left television in 1972, he created a series of performances which he called concerts, which were punctuated, of course, with all of the music that he had written, conducted by a very famous conductor, played by 20 members of the local symphony. But Red would perform on stage, sometimes for 2.5 hours.
Without stopping?
Without nonstop, no
Yes.
breaks, no
Yes,
intermission.
right.
And one day he invited me to go with him to Carnegie Hall.
My goodness.
It was quite a thrill, and he said, well, maybe we should bring a few paintings along to show my collectors, and we did, and he performed, but the painting and the concerts were unrelated to each other.
I see.
But in fact they were related because Red was there, and so many people came in from all over the world to see him at these concerts.
Oh. Now, is it true that Red created approximately 8,000 musical compositions, and were they operas, or what were they, Bill?
Every morning, Red would take an hour or 2 hours of his time when he woke up, and generally he woke up around 5 in the morning, 4:30 or 5, and always had with him what I call a portable keyboard, one of those keyboards you could pack in a trunk, and he would compose at least 5 and sometimes up to 7 songs per day.
Per day?
Per day. And then would go to breakfast. We'd have breakfast after that. So by the end of the week, he had maybe 40 individual musical compositions.
Oh, my
On
heavens.
Sunday, he always took Sunday and then selected the best of the musical compositions for each day. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they selected one, he threw out the others. He then gave those musical compositions to David Rose, his longtime conductor and arranger, and then David then completed the work and scored it and had it on paper, and ultimately Red created over a lifetime about 8,000 compositions, including 64 symphonies.
Symphonies.
And 60 played by Van Cliburn, the Philadelphia Philharmonic, London Symphony, and the Boston Pops.
Oh, my heavens. And he's our hometown Vincennes boy.
And
you know, are we ever
proud?
And we're so proud, and we're so honored and blessed to have Red want to be remembered here in Vincennes. He didn't want to be remembered in Hollywood. He wanted to come home, and I keep telling people, well, you know what? The mean little kid has finally come home, and he brought with him Clem Cadiddle Hopper and Freddie the Freeloader and all of those wonderful characters that Red
and Deadeye, the crooked sheriff.
Yes, yes.
But the interesting thing is, out of all the entertainers, and I've represented many over the years, very few, and in fact, almost no other entertainer in our lifetime was both a movie star, a radio star, a painter, a book writer, and he was just multi-talented because he never slept. All he did was work and create.
And create. He was just that creative genius, which was amazing. His creativity knew no end, really, because it went from, as you say, painting and music, all of the genres of creativity. Did he cook?
To my knowledge, he created ham hocks and beans and some other favorite dishes, and he said those basically were his very favorites from Indiana. Now, I don't know what you do in Indiana about that food. So
you know what? That is the absolute truth, Bill, because in '06, when I was chairman the first time for the Red Skelton Gala, I called Lothian and I said, "Hey, Lothian, what's Red's favorite food?" And she said, "Ham hocks and lima beans."
That's right.
And I laughed, and I just couldn't believe, with his ability to have any kind of wonderful food that he wanted, that he still liked our Knox County beans and ham hocks.
Well, he loved the fact that he was from Vincennes. We talked about it.
Yeah.
He prided himself from coming from this community,
Yes.
and he never lost being a Vincennes native.
No, he didn't, because he came back often. He dedicated bridges, and he came back. And to this day, something that a lot of people don't know is that Red created the Red Skelton Foundation. And to this day, that foundation in perpetuity provides winter clothing for needy children here in our community. And that will just go on forever and ever.
As will all of the other things that he created over the years. From the time he wrote hundreds of short stories, coloring books, musical books for students to learn how to play piano in high school.
Really? And he never took lessons.
And he never took lessons. and yet he could play the piano and several other instruments by ear.
My gosh.
Those paintings, everything that he did now has a home here that will go on into perpetuity.
Oh, exactly. And as I was in '06, I was looking for a headliner, an entertainer for our first show in the Performing Arts Center, and I was put into connection with an agent down in Tallahassee, Florida, and I told him that I was looking for an entertainer, and he asked me a few questions, and I said, well, it's for the brand new, just to open Red Skelton Performing Arts Center. And he said, Red Skelton, that's always that was always the response I got, Red Skelton. And he said, when Red came to Florida, I would always pick him up at the airport and take him to his gig. And one of the things that I had to do after I've got Red, to his hotel and everything, he always sent me out to buy a camera. So he said, I don't know how many cameras I bought for Red, but there were a lot of them because he wanted to take pictures. But the other thing that I loved that this agent told me was that, but then I'd have to take him to the airport. And he never wanted to be in a private room away from the public. He would be there, and he said, it was like within minutes there would be a dozen children swarming around Red, and Red was telling them stories. And their parents would eventually try to look for their children, and here they are all around Red, and Red was entertaining them and loving them so much.
Well, he loved people, and
he
was, no matter what status he achieved, which was the top status in Hollywood, he was very, very humble. I remember when I first went to Carnegie Hall. He had a number of Carnegie Hall concerts, and I was with him at one of the first in the early '70s. And his one of the announcers there, it was a dress rehearsal, and the announcer came on. And now we're proud at Carnegie Hall to have America's greatest clown. Red stood up at the intermission and said, "Young man," he said, "I appreciate your comments, but you are really too young to remember all of the clowns that have gone before me, from Felix Adler, Ed Wynn." He named them all. He said, that introduction is not appropriate, but you can say one of America's clowns.
Yes.
And I was really impressed when I heard that.
Yes. What a wonderful man. And talking about Ed Wynn, it was during the time in America where entertainers were traveling from town to town, you know, and we had a theater, we still have it, and it's being restored, called the Pantheon. And Edwin was appearing there, and Red was helping his widowed mother with, you know, money for just food and a little bit for rent. And he did a lot of things. He went and collected coal at the railroad track. And he was selling newspapers this one particular evening when Edwin came up to him. Red didn't know who he was, and said, young man, as the story goes, young man, is there any place here where, you know, you can have some entertainment? And Red supposedly said, well, I understand there's going to be a good show at the Pantheon tonight. And Edwin said to him, well, would you like to go? And he said, oh, yeah, no, sir, I've got to take all my money home to my mom. And so Edwin said, meet me back at the back door at a certain time. So Edwin gave him a couple of dollars to pay for more than enough of the newspapers that he had left. And Red ran home with the money and then showed up at the Pantheon at the back door. And Edwin brought him in. And the story goes is that he parted the curtains and held Red up to look at the audience. And that was kind of the moment that Red thought, oh, this is what I want to do.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it really is. But he always was doing things to help people, helping his mother raise his family. And he never stopped that, you know, as he grew more successful. Did you know that he and his first wife, Edna, just to survive and make some money, did those marathon dances that were so popular in the, what was it, 20s or 30s?
Well, they were in the 30s, basically. But, you know, Red also, because of the fact that he had lost Richard, his only son, we furnished many children's hospitals with prints of Red Skelton. And Red never wanted anyone to know about it because he didn't need that type of publicity, but he did it out of the goodness of his heart, and he gave a lot of money and he gave a lot of art to these hospitals and frequently even visited them. But as he got older, it became too difficult for him to see the children.
Sure. Well, yes, I'm sure that it did. But you know, I have a couple of really great stories that I'd like to relate here. In '06, when I was chairman, it just seemed like I was getting telephone calls from all over the United States, and one of them was from an 80-year-old nurse, retired nurse in Boise, Idaho, and she said, I just want to tell you a story about Red. I hear you're doing things about Red in his hometown. He said, yes, we certainly are. And she said, well, I was taking care of a little boy in a Shriners Hospital who was dying. He was very close to death, and all he wanted to do was meet Freddie the Freeloader. He just talked about Freddie the Freeloader, wanted to meet Freddie the Freeloader because he saw him on television and it made him laugh. Even though he was ill, he was laughing, and that was part of what Red wanted to do. So somehow this nurse was able to network and got in touch with somebody who knew Red and got the story to Red. And the next day, in that little boy's room, Red appeared as Freddie the Freeloader and sat with that little boy all afternoon.
I'm not surprised.
With him. Yeah.
It is a beautiful story. Red was asked by a lot of people to do a lot of things, and I was with him in it. We had a wonderful art show in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, yes.
And when we were in the elevator going up to his room, a lady happened to be in the elevator, and she says, Mr. Skelton, I have a favor to ask. She said, I don't know how I can ask it, but she says, I'm dying of cancer.
Oh, my goodness.
And I don't know how to tell my husband. She asked Mr. Skelton to call the husband.
Oh, my goodness.
And he did.
Oh, he did?
And then he literally collapsed afterwards. It was so difficult.
So it was so heart-rending for him.
But people asked Red to do things all the time, and because we were together a lot, I never saw him once, Marilyn, decline something that he could physically do to help someone.
Yes. Have you ever seen the books called, the chicken book, Chicken Soup for the Soul.
There's now a number of those out.
Yeah,
yes.
there are. Okay, and there's one called Chicken Soup for the Grieving Soul, and about the fourth story, or fifth, is just called Red. And I happened to be looking at this in a bookstore, and I saw Red, so you know what I did, I immediately turned to that page, and it was written by a woman named Susan Stevens, who, as a little girl, was in the same hospital with young Richard when he was dying of leukemia. And she had some terrible infection in her ankle that was going to require probably the amputation of her leg. And she was there alone. Her mother was very poor and was a single mom and had other children at home. And she said, if you read the story, it talks about Richard coming and sitting on her bed and talking and making her laugh, and you know, they just were kids in the hospital and making the best of where they were and what they were doing. And so she and Richard became friends, and she said one afternoon a taller, older version of this freckle-faced, red-haired Richard came into my room and introduced himself as Richard's father, and asked how I was and how I was doing. And I said, well, I'm going to face surgery tomorrow morning, and I might have my foot amputated. And she said, Red sat at her bed all night long. She said, every time I awakened, she was only 8 or 9 years old, every time I awakened, Red held my hand and said, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I'm going to be right here with you. And he sat there all night with her, encouraging her, and,
yes.
and was there the next morning to see her off to surgery. Fortunately, she didn't have to have that amputation, and then came back. I've talked to Susan Stevens personally, and she told me the story, and she said, to this day, all of these years later, I carry such deep love in my heart for Red Skelton and his humanitarianism.
And you know, that's one of the reasons I think that those types of stories have become legend around the United States, Canada, and
Yes.
certainly in various other parts of the
Yes.
world. Because Red's art, for example, is collected by people who live in over 44 different countries
Really?
today.
44 different countries.
And Red had his times of sadness too,
Oh, I
because
know.
of the things that
I
he
know.
went through and the loss of Richard.
Sure.
But he turned many times to painting.
Did
when
he?
he was in those periods of grief and
solace.
mourning, and
Yeah.
yet he would be able to take that soul, that energy, and put something onto canvas that
Yeah.
would make him and everybody else around him
Yes,
happy.
yes. But I bet you know a lot of funny things about Red too, don't you?
Well, I don't know if they're funny, Marilyn, but the fact is that Red was busy day and night.
Yeah.
If he wasn't writing a short story, he was composing a musical composition or painting, and he would paint in bed for the most part.
Oh, you're kidding.
Because during the years that he was on television and in the movies, he took a lot of pratfalls and
Oh, yes.
had really injured his knees. And
Had he?
he was most comfortable when he was in a horizontal position.
Sure.
So when we traveled around the country, we would have he would take several steamer trunks, his old big steamer trunks, and they'd be loaded with art supplies, canvases, paints, brushes,
Oh my gosh.
paper towels, because everything got messy wherever he was.
Imagine.
And he would work in bed. He really laid on top of his bed, and he would paint in sideways and create all these beautiful works of art. He didn't sit at an easel for the most part like you commonly associate
Why,
with
of
artists.
course.
But he had the inks, the paints, the pencils, the drawings. And one day we were at the Greenbrier in I believe it's White Sulphur Springs.
Yeah.
We were at a table that was much bigger. It was one round table, and the hotel, it was for the seating of 10 people. And the hotel had no other table but to seat us at this one. So at the end of the evening, he ordered a cup of coffee, and they had on I've never seen a more luxurious tablecloth in my life. And he bumped his coffee cup, and it went over the tablecloth. He had several colored pencils with him. He took that that basic spill of that coffee and developed it into a fabulous clown painting.
Oh my.
And I asked the maitre d', I said, well, we just can't let this tablecloth go back to the kitchen.
Exactly.
I said, would you please, I said, I'd like to offer, there's a charity event happening at the hotel. I said, I'd like to buy the tablecloth and see if we could offer it to the charity.
Yes.
So what we did is we took the tablecloth, and I felt terribly about doing it, but we cut out the drawing, and they auctioned it off that night for over $5,000
Oh my
for a children's
goodness.
organization.
What creativity.
With that story, though, then came a whole new line of drawings as opposed to paintings.
Really?
Red then started collecting the what we call the linens from airlines when they used to serve linens on first class.
In first class, yes. Those nice
They were measured
napkins.
sometimes 12 by 12,
Sure.
14 by 14.
Exactly.
And over the years, he developed an incredible sense of painting on these beautiful works of art, which we would then
my
frame.
heavens. Why, sure.
And rather than an oil painting, it would be a little less than an oil painting,
Oh
but
my
a fully
gosh.
developed color painting using various pencils
No
and things like that.
kidding.
And I'd say he did over 1,000 of those
Oh my goodness.
over the last 30 years
And
in
so
his
all
life.
those airlines were missing about 1,000 napkins. Huh?
And, well, but he went up and told the pilot, he said, I would like to steal 12 of these napkins. And of course, when he left, they gave him 24 of them to do.
Of course. That's wonderful.
And then one day he went to the White House, and he
my
asked, it was with President Reagan. He went in to meet President Reagan, and President Reagan had his left hand in his pocket and was shaking Red with his right hand. And Red looked at, he says, Ronnie, he says, you're the only politician that I've ever met with his hands in his own pocket. And he asked the president for 5 or 6 White House napkins, and he got them all. So.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Oh, of course. Oh, what a wonderful story. You know, I have to tell you another story that I know of. At one time in my life, I lived on Monterey Bay, and just near Highway 1, that beautiful coastal highway. And Lothian was telling me the story. My husband bought Red's tomato red stretch Mercedes and trailed it back here. I had to drive our little Volkswagen car across the continent because he bought that car and trailed it all the way to Indiana from California. But the story that Lothian told me about that car, she said, we were driving from Los Angeles up to Santa Barbara, and it was kind of hilly. And as that highway is, there's a lot of produce. There are Brussels sprouts and artichokes and
everything.
Onions. And this big truck had a load of onions on it, and it was in front of Red and Lothian's car, this tomato red Mercedes, and the onions started falling off the back of the truck, and Red was kind of quiet for a few minutes, but before long he pulled over and he said, Lothie, we've got to pick up those onions off this highway. And so she said the next 15 minutes we spent picking up those onions off the highway and putting them in the trunk of the car so we could take the onions home and have onions to eat.
That's beautiful. That's lovely.
Oh, he was such a great man. What did you know of Mr. Skelton before you actually met him?
Well, being as a teenager at home, every Tuesday night, of course, stores. I grew up in Milwaukee, and I remember when his television program came on, everything would shut down. You couldn't go shopping, you couldn't do anything because everyone wanted to see the Red Skelton Hour. And of course, as I then went on to school, I was not able to watch television as much as I had. And really the next time that I saw Red, after about 10 years in the 50s of watching him with my parents, then I saw him on the Merv Griffin show after he had just left television in 1972. And he was showing Merv on the talk show several of the paintings that Red had done in the 50s and 60s. See, Red had painted really since the late 20s.
All of that time.
And most of the paintings at those years were given away to people such as Bob Hope Milton
No
Berle,
kidding. To
Carol
his
Burnett.
friends.
They basically
Yeah,
gave them away.
Sure.
And but Red took to the Merv Griffin show some paintings, and Red had never shown publicly before, and I thought, well, gee, this might be an opportunity to take his art and really make it available and show the world.
Oh, yes.
And over the years, he painted many, many works of art. Many paintings such as these, which are behind us, were reproduced into limited edition lithographs. He signed them, he numbered them, and sold them to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of collectors around the world.
Now, will you explain to me and to our audience what a lithograph is?
Well, there are many different forms of reproducing works of art. Lithography is perhaps one of the ways. The other is serigraphy. And today we know things as giclées, which are basically taking a high digital scan of a work of art and then sending it through a complicated computerization program and then letting a special inkjets shoot out onto the canvas. Almost the same thing that's on the canvas. But that's a relatively new development. Lithography, basically, and there's several different types of lithography, but most of the pieces that you see in the back here are photo offsets, which are basically reproductions done through the lens of a camera.
Oh, they are.
And then Red would have them mounted, and he would sign them and number them.
Okay.
Many of the other works of art, such as the ones that are being or will be shown throughout this program, such as the painting of Red parasailing over Maui, was done as a serigraph, which is another older method of reproduction, and that is taking the painting and recreating it through the use of screens, so that basically all of the red of a painting will be pushed through one screen. It's like a stenciling process.
Yes, but many stencils,
many together.
and each stencil a different color, if I remember.
Different color, and so you do maybe 100 different colors, which would take 100 different days.
Oh my gosh.
To do it, so it was quite
because
an artistic accomplishment to do it.
Very much so.
But Red was very much involved in the development of these works of art. So he created in different forms, and in fact, he also did a tapestry, which I would like to show you.
Oh, I'd love to see
this
that.
was based on a painting.
Oh, this
Marilyn.
is such feely art. I love it.
And this is done out of silk and wool.
It is, and all hand done.
All hand
Every
done.
stitch is
Well,
done
he did
by
not do the
hand.
stitching. He supervised it.
Oh my gosh! And he's saying grace. He is saying grace in front of a can of pork and beans. Now, how about that?
He believed that Freddie the Freeloader, although Freddie the Freeloader had little or nothing in terms of assets or homes or anything else, Freddie was still thankful that he had his health, that he had the ability to work with others, and he had the ability to help other children.
Yes. Well, you know, I asked Lothian once, you know, we've been friends for 10 years now, and I just love that lady. I asked her once, you know, Red has so many characters. Does he identify with one of them more than any other? And she said, yes, Freddie the Freeloader. So, you know, that has just been a real thrill for us. We had fiberglass statues made in '06. I found a guy up in Wisconsin, as a matter of fact, who did fiberglass molds. And we emailed back and forth, and he created the mold of Freddie the Freeloader. And we have business patrons in town who bought the form unfinished, and then local artists each took a Freddie the Freeloader and developed the decor according to their artistic talent.
Well, Red
You'll
is
be
best
seeing them during the parade.
Red, of course, identified with Freddie the Freeloader, but actually his fans really identified, I think, more than he did, because, you know, some of the famous characters, Clem Cadiddlehopper, the Mean with a Kid, George Appleby, and all of the characters were reduced to paintings, but he was a fabulous artist that could do Paris cityscapes, landscapes.
And I've never seen any.
He did. He had quite a Japanese collection of art in his own right in Palm Springs, but painted samurai warriors that were absolutely fabulous works of art.
I have never seen that.
Basically, people expected clowns from Red.
Yes, yes, they did.
But yet, when people didn't even know Red from foreign countries, we had many clients come to us from France, Switzerland, Germany, and they really were not aware of the Red Skelton Hour.
No.
But they were collectors of clowns.
I see.
And they told us, we've never seen a more sensitive clown, because these collectors said their eyes mirrors the soul.
Oh, their eyes, and that's right. I mean, you just look at any of these eyes, and you know, sometimes I can just see red right in one of those faces. Now, where did you meet him? Because you were dean of the law school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Now, how did a guy like you meet a comedian who is an artist?
Well, after I left teaching at the University of Wisconsin Law School, I opened up an entertainment law practice in Waikiki. And one of the clients that I had was a major art gallery in the Waikiki area. And I saw Red, as I mentioned earlier, on the Merv Griffin show, and asked whether or not he'd like to show his art to a group of people that come to Waikiki, about 10 million every year.
10 million,
and
oh my gosh.
and
I've never been there.
Well, it's the most beautiful spot, I think, one of the most beautiful spots in the world. And Red said, yes, I would be interested in showing my art, because he had never shown his art to collectors, other than he had shown these paintings to the Merv Griffin show. And the first show that was set up was in the early 70s, and I think that Red put out maybe 20 paintings or 25 paintings, and within the first 10 minutes of the exhibition, everything was sold out.
It was sold in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Now, I know he was very productive, but you know, he was doing television, he was doing films. How productive was he with paintings? You know, one a week or one a month, or, you know, how?
Well, I would say that
during that period. Well, of course, that was after the
This was
TV.
right after the TV program.
So he wasn't as busy.
His TV was from 52 to 1972.
Oh.
And right after that period, then he had the time to do the things that he really also was interested in, the concerts and the painting. So some of the paintings took him 30 years. I remember one painting that I saw from 1940. And he said, I've been working on this for a few years. And I said,
my gosh.
yes. I said, you're not a very fast artist. But he finished it finally in 1975.
Oh, he did.
So he had a great amount of paintings that he had never finished before.
Isn't that something?
So between the drawings, he did a lot of little pencil drawings. He did a lot of drawings on the linens that we spoke about from the airlines. And he did a lot of paintings on canvas.
But you know, paintings like this, Bill, are all oil. They're not acrylic. These are all oil paintings.
Correct.
And you know, being a kind of a would-be hopeful emerging artist myself, I know oil takes a long time to dry, and
but less time in the desert.
Maybe that's what it is.
Less time in the desert, right?
Maybe that's what it was.
But Red also led a productive life that most business people are not accustomed also, because remember, from the time Red woke up in the morning, which would be many times 4 or 4:30, by the time 6 o'clock breakfast rolled around, he had already completed 7 musical compositions.
Oh my gosh.
He then started on his books, painting. So during a 24-hour period of time, he created an awful lot of work.
Did you know that in this wonderful multi-million-dollar collection that he left to us in Vincennes in Indiana, that we have a French bed? It's an iron bed. It's a single bed. It's very ornate. It's very, very pretty. And it has down quilts on it and pillows and everything. And that's one of the beds that he created in it. And we're going to have it in the museum, right along with that red Mercedes that he picked the onions up with.
Well, it'd be perfect, because he loved to paint, as I said, in bed. And that he would have, at any one time, maybe 3 paintings going.
Oh, no
So he had canvases on one pillow. He had another canvas next to him. And paints, of course, all over. And of course, the hotel loved it, because then they kept the paintings, because it was paint splattered all over the bedspread.
Of course, and they said Red Skelton slept here.
And they had the proof of it. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Did you feel Red changed very much from when you first met him, through those 30 years that you traveled with him and you knew him so well, did you see a transformation or we all change. I mean, if we're really thinking and doing things, we change in life. We don't stay static. What did you see in Red?
When I first met him, I saw a man that was extremely humble, and he didn't have to say anything about his accomplishments or felt he didn't want to talk about them. And to the time that he passed away, I only saw a man that was kind, was lovable, and giving.
Oh.
He couldn't do enough for you. And he had friends all over the world. And I did not see a personality change. He had days, of course, as we all do.
Oh, sure.
When we weren't feeling good, or when he had some sadness in his life. And he had certainly had enough sadness in his life. But throughout all of these periods, you would not know those days that he was sad.
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't know
He covered it up.
He was an actor, remember?
Yes.
But he internalized so much of it. And even though as he got older, he had a lot more aches and pains in his legs and his knees because of the pratfalls that he had taken. Of course,
exactly.
But he was always lovable, kind, outgoing, and if he was outside and a tour bus came by his home, he would wave at him. Sometimes he'd even go out and and talk to him. And he never took a meal in his room at a hotel.
Oh, no, I'm not surprised.
He always went out and had dinner or lunch or breakfast because he wanted to be with the people that made him so popular.
And you know, that's something that Lothian told me, too. My husband and I were spending the winters in Palm Springs, very close to where Lothian and Red lived. And after I got acquainted, it just seemed like, the hairdresser I went to knew him, and the butcher that I went to knew him, and everybody knew him. And what everybody, especially in the restaurants, and this was something else Lothian said, she said, Red would eat, but he wasn't really paying any attention to his food. He'd be turned sideways, and he was watching people, and he was watching their expressions and their animation and everything. And that's why he was such a great mimic. And something that I'm so awestruck by, Bill, is the scope of his comedic talent. Because it's my understanding he left Vincennes on the back of a medicine wagon, and he fell off the back, and somebody laughed at him, and that's when he began falling all the time to make people laugh. And that was the beginning, the beginning of it.
That could very well be the case, because he said he worked with Doc Lewis.
Oh, no kidding.
And that he was the young man that mixed what he called the elixir of life, which Red said was nothing but snake oil. And he made this in used whiskey bottles.
Oh.
And he started drawing and gaining attention of the people that were at these medicine shows. Doc Lewis would come on stage, start selling the elixir of life, and Red would take these little liquor bottles and go out and collect them and sell them for 5 cents each. Then he started doing little drawings, anything to catch the attention.
Yes, and that's part of it. And then, he's had so many famous friends. You were talking about Van Cliburn before, with his music. And because he had such kind of an elastic face, he could do anything with that face.
Made of butyl rubber.
Oh, it really was. But he was a mime. And Lothian told me that one of his very, very best friends was an artist we just lost not too long ago, Marcel Marceau.
Yes.
That they were very good friends. And if you really get analytical about it, he was a mime. He did slapstick. He did vaudeville, and he did the whole thing almost of American comedy.
Because he watched others and found humor and comedy in every part of daily life. But that's how the painting started also, because when his mother, as Red tells the story, was a cleaning woman or a charwoman, but he called her basically a costume designer in the circus,
of course.
but I don't know if she was quite that. Here in this part of Indiana, she would make up the clowns in the Hagenbeck and Wallace Circus. And Red watched the application of these paints around the eyes, and then he would mimic the mother and go out and paint on his own. And Red said when he was 7 years old, he took some hair off of his head, wrapped it around a pencil, dipped it in whatever colors or inks or paints that he had, and painted a full-fledged clown on the tent of one of the circus shows that he had.
Oh my gosh.
And so the fact that he became a mime really was, he became an observer of life.
Yes, exactly.
And if you were to walk with him down a street or walk with him through a hotel, he would pull you over and whisper a story because he saw something or he saw an individual that reminded him of a joke. Red was a master of telling jokes, and he had no writers at the end. He had a few writers, obviously, on his television show. And very few people know that Johnny Carson was one of his writers. The first job Johnny got out of college was working for Red. But all of the paintings that you see here and all the subsequent paintings came from a real life involvement. Many of the paintings that Red did of unknown clowns, or at least unknown to me, were basically clowns that he knew when he was with his mother in the circus.
Is that right?
And he retained almost a photographic retention of these clowns.
Isn't that incredible?
So many of the clowns just appeared again on canvas 50 years after Red last saw them.
Is that right, that he retained that in his mind?
So, and then he could mimic people, and the routines that he did on stage with Guzzler's Gin and all of the
that is so
all
funny.
of the famous things that he did were basically things that he watched and observed people.
Yes.
That's why it was so funny. He didn't make it up.
He
just mimicked real life.
Yes. I have twin grandsons, and when they were about 12, they were here visiting me from Denver, and I put on the Red Skelton tape about the Guzzler Gin thing, and they started laughing so hard they couldn't stop. They were crying, and they had never seen anything like that before. They just, it has never lost its appeal. It is never going to get old. It still appeals to youngsters and to oldsters and everybody in between. And one of the things, we have a Skelton in the School program here that we started so that we can teach this younger generation what a wonderful man Red Skelton was, and our hometown boy. And we're hoping to take that statewide, at least, into the schools. And a principal went by one of the rooms when they were showing a video that Red had done, and he said to me, I've never heard these kids belly laugh like that before. And then a little boy went home and said, Mom, he told this little joke, and he said, Red Skelton doesn't tell nasty things. He just is funny. So kids recognize that, and they're recognizing that, we're tired of all of this terrible, what's called comedy anymore. And we're looking for, again, back to Red and the funniness of us in the comments on human nature, things that we find funny. Like some of those jokes that you were telling me before about, he said, I know one thing that he said, and you're probably going to pick up on this, one of the greatest preventions of divorce is not to get married.
That is correct. And when he gave advice to people about marriage, he said, my wife and I we go out to restaurants twice a week. She goes on Tuesday and I go on Thursday. But these were all natural, spontaneous comments.
Yes.
He didn't have writers after the early 1970s. He did it all himself.
Yeah.
And he was a treasure trove of natural humor, and not a day would go by that he didn't create new stories.
Yes.
Among the many other things that he did in the creative world, such as the art.
Exactly. In a period of 30 years, you must have seen, as all artists do, Van Gogh had his blue period, and that every artist, as they develop and transition, they all have certain periods. Did you see this in Red's art from the beginning to the?
Red perfected his art, actually. He became much more adept at using oils, doing the basic work of drawing, creating a work of art, and then taking that work of art and repainting it onto a canvas. So he started really becoming extremely serious, because his art, as you know, is owned by some major collectors.
Is it really?
Some of his art has sold for as much as $275,000 a painting.
Is that right? And where are those collections, Bill? You can tell me.
Well, without you mentioning the
names, of course,
we have collections of major. We have 4 Fortune 500 corporation founders that are major collectors.
Is that right?
3 presidents of the United States.
Oh my goodness!
And these people are not collectors who receive them as a gift. These are people who acquired them, purchased them because they love his art. I thought one of the most interesting clients was one of the largest real estate developers in Japan. He purchased a clown because he loved that clown. And you know, people from France who are relatively not too caring about American art. Yes, we
especially.
We have many collectors in France and Europe. And they love not only the clowns, but the seascapes. He did some seascapes as well as samurai, warriors.
Oh my goodness. Well, do you think when we have this multi-million-dollar collection of his original art that he gifted to us, we get that museum built? What do you think that's going to happen? Is it going to bring people here to see his art?
Well, Red made a lasting contribution. He really chronicled our times from the 1930s, from the radio shows into the 40s with the MGM, then into the 50s and 60s television, and then into the 70s and 80s and 90s with his concerts.
Yes.
So Red really, during that, from the 30s to the 90s, gave 60 years.
Isn't that incredible?
And history will, I think, prove and confirm that the legacy of Red, be it movies, be it radio, be it art, really made a significant contribution to our time, because where do you go today to find history encapsulated within 60 years of a person's lifetime? Now you folks here in Indiana have that, and more will be coming to you as people learn about this fabulous collection.
Yes, and the treasure we have. And you know, the museum, as we develop it, we're going to have a wonderful art gallery, of course, to honor his painting and show the transition that he made. We have some drawings that are, I will say, a little bit on the primitive side, going up to all, you know, his some of his last work that was so absolutely sophisticated in its finishing and the nuances of the paint and the design and everything. But we're also, because Red loved kids, we're making this museum an interactive museum for families and kids to come to, and we're kind of think we're going to have a little place where kids can go in and they can put on Freddie the Freeloader makeup and put on the clown thing, and they can get on a stage and have a little TV camera, and they can do their little Freddie the Freeloader act, and it'll be taped for them, and then they get off and they've got this little tape to take home with them. But lots of really fun things for kids. And it's going to be kind of, it's going to be an education center as well. We're going to have, I believe, we're going to try to have an archival center for students, but we're also going to take art in education all the way down through the early elementary grades. And I'll tell you one thing that I've learned having grandchildren. People don't realize the importance of art in developing a creative brain, that using the right side of the brain in doing art gives you double brain power, practically. You know, so many of us think with the left brain, that's how we learn arithmetic and all of the things that we learn in school. But it takes art and music to develop the other side of our brain and give us more ability to learn and to think creatively.
But it's interesting, here Red was doing this since he was 5 years old.
Exactly.
And he did it up until the day he died.
Exactly. exactly.
And in between, we did all the musical compositions and all the short stories and everything else. So he was an extremely talented man whose legacy is now hopefully going to go into perpetuity through your efforts here.
We have formed a Red Skelton Museum Foundation. It is comprised of community members and some university members. And this foundation actually now owns and has governance over the collection with the promise to protect it and to show it and make it be a service to the public, and showing it to them, and the museum itself. So, but because it is private, it's up to us to raise the funding for it. And right now we're going to be in a kind of a funding mode and hope that we can get all of the community and all the people in the United States possible to make a donation so that we can finish this wonderful museum.
And Red's image, aura, and persona also went into Canada very well, because collectors in Canada loved Red, and I think that is also another area for consideration.
Is it? Okay. Okay. Well, you know what? This time has gone by so fast, and I knew that it would, because you're so charming and articulate and knowledgeable. And it has been such a pleasure to have you. Is there anything you'd like to tell us in these last few minutes?
It was a blessing. One's life can be blessed in different ways, and knowing a person like Red, having gone through so many experiences, made me a better person by watching what he did through adversity, what he did when he was famous, being humble in victory, gracious in defeat. I mean, how he was a great role model for me and for everyone else of my staff that worked with Red. And I am very, very proud that the university is taking that legacy and will develop it and allow other generations in the future.
It's going to be wonderful. Our museum is going to tell the life story of Red Skelton, a great humanitarian, a great comedian, a great artist, and
a wonderful person.
That's absolutely right.
And I'm proud that he was my friend.
Oh, and how lucky you are. And these 10 years that I've been involved in this project, I feel that I know him and care for him deeply. So
thank you for inviting me here.
Well, you're certainly welcome. Now we have just a few more minutes too, and would you like to tell us, should we talk a little bit about those funny one-liners that he had about, I remember one of them, he said, he said, my wife went to the beauty shop and she got one of those facials, I think they're called mud packs, and she came home and she looked absolutely gorgeous until the mud fell off.
Well, Red never ceased coming up, and these were quick comments that he made. I remember one incident where we had in San Francisco. We invited to the Fairmont Hotel 2,000 collectors that gathered to look at Red's latest works of art. We had a lady about 75 years old that had purchased a work of art and wanted an autograph, and she wouldn't take, she had already several autographs, but she wanted another one. She got her daughter to bend over. She got on top of the daughter's shoulders at 75 and jumped over Red's table, right onto his table to get an autograph.
Oh my gosh.
Red had an ability to attract people.
He did.
Loved Red.
We
at the Fairmont Hotel, we had lunch one day, and a waitress came up and saw it was Red Skelton at the table. She dropped the tray of food that she had and apologized.
She was so shocked.
She said, Red, you saved my husband's life.
Oh my goodness.
And of course he didn't know what
had happened.
But she told him in 1970 that it was a Tuesday night, her husband had a heart attack, was in life support and wasn't expected to live.
Oh my.
And in the emergency room they had the TV apparently near his bed, and he woke up and Red Skelton was on.
And he said, and good night, and
God
if I
bless
brought you,
That's right. And she said that absolutely was the
Turned him around.
That's right. And throughout that whole period of 30 years, these stories are legion. That it's just only one of thousands of different incidents.
Listen, thank you so much. It has been such a joy to hear firsthand.
My pleasure.
Someone who knew and loved Fred.
Keep on the good job, dear. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Okay, thank you so much for
Marilyn.
being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. She was flashing the 1 minute.